body of the missing Bristol woman Shirley Banks has been found in a forest. George Schultz says his Middle East peace talks are going well. 6 months after she disappeared from her home in Bristol, the body of Shirley Banks has been found. It was discovered in a remote area of woodland in Somerset. Mrs. Banks was last seen on October the 8th last year, just a few weeks after her wedding. Last December, a man was charged with abducting and murdering her. The body was found by a forest ranger lying in a stream in Great Wood Forest near Bridgwater. Police say there were serious head injuries.
The search for Shirley Banks' body ended in the Quantock Forest near Bridgwater. A woman out walking discovered it after wandering from the main path and scrambling 15 feet down a slope to a shallow stream. It was partially covered by rhododendron bushes and had been here for anything between 1 month and a year. Police had to check dental records to establish the identity. It was at the beginning of October that Shirley Banks disappeared after a shopping trip in her home city of Bristol. She didn't return to her husband of only 6 weeks that night, and the following day called work to say she'd be taking the day off sick. Nothing has been heard or seen of her since. The discovery of her car in the Lee Woods area of Bristol several weeks later prompted a huge police search. They were to return here several times, but find nothing. In November, though, a man was arrested and charged first with stealing Mrs. Banks' car and subsequently with her murder. Since then, a 50-strong team of detectives has been working on the case full-time. Ironically, though, it was sheer chance that led to the discovery of the body they'd been looking for. It was found more than 40 miles from the area of Bristol they'd been searching. 100 officers have now been moved into the Quantock Forest and are likely to remain here for several days looking for further clues.
Police in Northampton.
Good evening. The main news in the West. The body of a woman found in an isolated Somerset wood has been identified tonight as that of Shirley Banks, the Bristol woman who's been missing for more than 6 months. The news was officially announced just a few minutes ago, but speculation has been growing all day that a body found on Forestry Commission land near the village of Adscombe in the Quantock Forest was that of Mrs. Banks. A man, John Cannon, is in custody awaiting trial for her murder. David Garmston reports.
The body may never have been discovered. The Quantock Forest walks are popular, but the body was lying in a stream 15 feet down a slope from the main path and covered by thick rhododendron bushes. It was purely by chance that a woman chose this particular spot to scramble down to the stream in search of moss to be used in a flower arrangement. She reported what she found to the forest warden.
I thought I'd better go and make sure that there actually was a body, so we went down into the gully and there was the body of what we thought was a woman, but nobody could be really sure.
30 officers have spent the day searching the gully. In total, more than 100 have been involved in the operation. Until last night, police believed the body had been there for no more than a month, but today's post-mortem examination revealed it could have been there for anything up to a year. Immediately, the possibility it could be the body of Shirley Banks became the police's only major line of inquiry. Jewellery found on the body matched jewellery missing from Mrs. Banks's home, and this afternoon police announced that dental records proved their suspicions to be correct. The 6-month search for the body of Shirley Banks was over.
Newlywed Shirley Banks disappeared almost 6 months ago after a shopping trip to Bristol's Broadmead. The following day, she called the office in Patchway, where she worked as a sales assistant. She complained of feeling ill and said she would be taking the day off. It was the last contact anyone had with Shirley Banks, who'd been married only 6 weeks. 3 weeks after her disappearance, her car was found in a garage in the Lee Woods area of Bristol. It had been resprayed and the number plates had been changed. Police immediately instigated a full-scale search of the surrounding woodland. It was to be an operation they were to repeat several times, on the ground with police officers, in the air with thermal image camera equipment, and underwater with frogmen. It was all to prove fruitless. They found nothing. In November, a man was arrested and charged with stealing the car. In December, the same man, 33-year-old John Cannon, appeared in court again, this time charged with the murder of Shirley Banks. Since then, a 50-strong team of detectives has been working full-time on the case. Their inquiries have taken them all over Britain, but until today it had been a murder inquiry without a body. Ironically, the discovery of that body owed nothing to good detective work. It was found by chance by a woman out walking in the Quantock forest. The search for Shirley Banks' body is over, but the search for further clues has only just begun. Officers are likely to remain here for several days.
And just a few minutes ago, the Assistant Chief Constable confirmed the body had been identified by article.
Shirley Banks, the Bristol woman whose body was discovered near Bridgewater over the Easter holiday. Today, police continued to search around the small stream where her decomposed body lay. It was found by 2 walkers at Overstowey on the Quantock Hills. The searchers still want to find pieces of Mrs. Banks' clothing. She disappeared 6 months ago after a shopping trip in Bristol. Today, her husband Richard told HTV News that the discovery of her body was a shock, but he was relieved that the mystery of her disappearance
The body was found in the Quantocks 3 days ago. Was told this afternoon that she died from repeated blows to the head. A report from the Home Office pathologist said she had very severe fractures to the skull. Meanwhile, police, still at the scene where the body was found, have discovered an item of Shirley Banks' jewellery, as well as clothing, which has not yet been identified as hers.
The inquest was given details of the post-mortem examination carried out on Shirley Banks by the Home Office pathologist Professor Bernard Knight. He found massive fractures to her skull, probably inflicted, he said, while she was still alive. And it was a strong possibility that she'd been hit on the head repeatedly by a heavy stone. He concluded the cause of death was severe injuries to the head. The inquest heard that Richard Banks identified jewellery taken from the body as being his wife's, including a gold necklace and 2 rings, and dental records confirmed it was Shirley. Coroner Michael Rose said he was satisfied that head injuries were the cause of her death. Even as the inquest was being held, police were heralding a major breakthrough in the case. Forensic scientists are now examining an area of the bank 200 feet upstream from where the body was discovered. First, some human hair was found, then an item of jewellery, since positively identified as belonging to Shirley, and some clothing, which is now being examined. The search is being intensified. 70 officers are working in the area of Ramscombe. Shirley Banks' clothes, her handbag and a watch are still missing. As police hacked away at the dense woodland, the search is on for minute clues.
I'm fairly confident that by the end of the search of this area, there will not be a hair or a fibre that we will have missed.
Forensic examination, then, is clearly central now to this case.
That's right. We're looking for something, because we've been led to this area by certain items that we found, we are now looking for forensic and biological samples to take us a little step further.
Is it safe to assume that the body may have been put into the stream here and then carried down over the months?
That's certainly a consideration that we're looking at at this moment.
Shirley Banks' body is being held in the mortuary of Yeovil District Hospital, where a second post-mortem is a strong possibility. But it is here in the Home Office Forensic Science Laboratory in Chepstow that the complex task of analysing the mass of evidence gathered in the forest is going on. Now it has been established that Shirley Banks died from head injuries. The main task is to find the murder weapon. It could be a long job.
A 33-year-old Bristol businessman has been charged with the abduction and murder of Mrs. Banks and stealing her.
What else? We'll be discussing this in just a moment, but
it's 3 days now
since her body was discovered in woods down on the Quantocks in Somerset, and the remote spot where her body was found, a good 50 miles from her home in Bristol, is regarded by the police as very significant. First of all, what about these discoveries today? How significant are those?
Well, an awful lot of bits and pieces have been discovered down there. How significant they are, we simply don't know at the moment. Clearly, there are an awful lot of scientific tests which need to be made, and at the end of the day, we should know exactly where we are with it.
All along, this seems to have been regarded very much as a Bristol affair. Now, because of what has happened, everything seems to have changed.
Yes, the activity is very much down on the Quantocks at the moment, and that's really the message I want to get across this evening. If you live down on the Quantocks, or if you regularly walk in that area, there's some items of clothing we want you to look out for. Or did you see them in the past? We start off here. We've got the actual trousers and pullover that we know she was wearing the last time she was seen. You see this mustard-coloured pair of legging-type trousers and a beige pullover.
So these actually haven't turned up?
No, they haven't, no.
Now, next to that, you've got a dress. Now, she bought this on that shopping trip in Broadmead the night she disappeared.
Yes, the very last night she was seen alive. This blue and white dress, we know she bought in Broadmead, and again, that hasn't turned up either.
Something else, of course, that she went out and bought, people may remember, she bought a pair of shoes.
Yes, she bought a pair of blue shoes and matching stockings to go with the blue and white dress. And, of course, also we know she was wearing some black high-heeled shoes and had a brown handbag with her. Again, we want people, if they recall seeing anything like this in the woods over the last 5 or 6 months, please telephone in.
Now, what response have you had to your appeals for cars that might have been seen in that Quantock area?
We've had a considerable response, but we're particularly keen if anyone saw a black-coloured BMW saloon car in that area shortly after the 8th of October. Additionally, of course, people will remember that Shirley had an orange-coloured Mini Clubman, which when we discovered it was actually repainted blue.
Do you yet know if Shirley was killed down on the Quantocks, or was she killed somewhere else and then just dumped down there?
Well, we simply don't know at the moment, but hopefully, with enough help from people down on the Quantock area, we might be able to answer that question.
So, on now to our other case.
Museum, the inquest into the death of Shirley Ann Banks was opened and adjourned. Coroner Michael Rose arrived to conduct a 15-minute hearing at which a series of written statements were read out. One was from Shirley Banks' husband, Richard. He had been shown jewellery found on the body, including a gold and amethyst ring of which he said his wife had been especially fond. These and dental records had helped identify the body in the woods. A statement from the pathologist, Professor Bernard Knight, was read out. He had conducted the post-mortem examination and found there had been severe fractures of the skull. These, he said, were consistent with repeated blows by a heavy stone. He said the most likely cause of death was head injury, and this was accepted and recorded by the coroner. The coroner left, having said he'd release the body for a funeral in a couple of days. Before that, a second post-mortem examination is to be carried out. Far along the forest track near the place where Mrs. Banks was found, the police hunt for clues continues. The search has been intensified in one particular taped-off area known by police as Lane 17. This is where 2 items of clothing have been found and where forensic scientists are now focusing most of their attention.
I certainly hope by the end of the search of this area that there will be nothing of any evidential value left behind. The extent of the search at the moment is taking the form that we are looking for something as minute as a hair or a fibre, and by that very means I don't expect to miss anything at all. Because a man in custody has been charged with the murder of Shirley Banks, no more details of what's been found can be given here, but it's clear that the painstaking search of the woods is yielding results.
And reporting other news in the West tonight.
Banks, whose body was discovered on the Quantocks 4 days ago, have been speaking today for the first time about her death. An inquest heard yesterday that Mrs. Banks, who disappeared from Bristol 6 months ago, had severe head injuries and had probably been hit with a heavy stone. Police are still hunting for clues to her death at the spot where her body was found. The search has now taken on the look of a gold mining operation. Police are raking the embankments of the stream where Shirley Banks's body was found and sieving through the mud and debris under the water. This is the reality of the search for clues in the Shirley Banks case. Every stone, every leaf, every twig is being examined in minute detail. It's the most comprehensive search ever undertaken by Avon and Somerset Police. 50 officers are involved in the search, which has now been going on for 4 days. It's an arduous operation from dawn to dusk. The men have been brought in from all over Avon and Somerset, and the discovery of Shirley's jewellery and some clothing was a great boost to morale. Food, drink, everything has to be brought up to this remote spot.
They regard it as a challenge. They find it very rewarding when they do find items of evidential value, and they feel that they've made a positive contribution then to the investigation.
Police say they've had a good response from the public to appeals for information about anything suspicious in the woods at about the time Shirley disappeared last October. One other line of investigation is to analyse the water which flowed over Shirley's body for several months. Meanwhile, in Crewkerne, Shirley's parents arrived home from a holiday in Crete after being told that her body had been discovered.
The whole thing has gone on and on with one bit of horror after another unfolding almost, and of course the long uncertainty too, which has been in many ways the most difficult aspect for us.
What are your feelings today?
Very, very mixed. Relief in some ways, tremendous pain in others. Lovely thoughts of Shirley, lovely thoughts of her family, and I just feel now, thank God she's been found and we can put it at rest and perhaps come to terms with it all.
Richard Banks, Shirley's husband, is now with the Reynolds. The family hope to hold a funeral for Shirley as soon as possible.
Evidence tape recorded by a worker at Hinkley Point.
The murdered Bristol woman whose body was discovered on the Quantocks 2 weeks ago was buried in Somerset in a churchyard this afternoon. Among the mourners at the parish church of Martock was Richard Banks, her husband, and her parents, who live in Crewkerne.
Shirley Banks was brought up in Martock. She had a happy childhood here. Today, her husband Richard came to the 13th century Church of All Saints, together with other members of the family, to lay Shirley to rest, more than 6 months after she disappeared. It was a dark, damp day, suiting the sombre mood of the occasion. The church porch was full of floral tributes to 29-year-old Shirley, including one from the parents of Susie Lamplugh, the missing London estate agent. Another was from Avon and Somerset Police. During the 30-minute service, Canon John Wilson paid tribute to Shirley's generosity, tolerance and vitality. He said she was a happy person who radiated goodness. You were glad, he said, to have been in her company. Mourners were invited to donate to the Susie Lamplugh Trust, which helps to protect women. Then the coffin emerged from the west door of the church, accompanied by Shirley's father and stepmother, George and Liz Reynolds. Richard Banks was supported on either side by Shirley's sisters, Gillian and Alison. Shirley was buried in the churchyard in a private ceremony. Later, the vicar of Martock, the prebendary Peter Coney, who knew Shirley, talked about her.
Well, she was a typical active and happy girl. Made a lot of friends locally in the village. And with her sisters, she was very well liked.
What do you think the importance, the significance of today is for the family?
Well, it forms a watershed between the months and months of suspense that they've been going through this past week, when they've, each of them in their own way, had to accept the reality.
Shirley disappeared last October, just 6 weeks after her wedding to Richard. Her body was found less than a fortnight ago in a remote woodland on the Quantocks. Since then, a team of 40 officers has carried out an inch-by-inch search of the area, hoping to find clues to her death. In the end, they found 30 items, including jewellery and clothing, which are now being analysed by forensic scientists. Detectives, meanwhile, are sifting through new information following a recent appeal for witnesses. But today was just the latest chapter in the ordeal of Shirley's family. Still to come, an inquest and a trial.
Shirley Banks' funeral in Somerset this afternoon.